It's a long time.
They tapped him if you wanted to see where you were, but it's up to you. Okay, you guys ready to go? Yeah. Yes? You're welcome.
Well, actually, I hadn't seen this one in a long time.
So who'd like to ask the first question? Any question? There we go.
How'd you decide you wanted to be a teacher?
I actually decided very early. I think I was probably in middle school. Of course, that time it was called junior high school, but I was really lucky. I had some really inspiring teachers, and I kind of thought, gee, this seems like it's a pretty cool thing. So, and I never really deflected from that. So that was really my goal going through high school, my goal through college, and I really have not regretted it one bit. So, yeah. Yes?
Why history?
Probably because it was the only subject I was good in. I was pretty good in PE, but history was always something I was kind of interested in. I think it goes back to my grandfather. My grandfather was the father figure in my life, as my dad had died when I was 4. So he was one that took me out and on hikes all the time, which I still love to do, and he's the one that got me interested in camping and backpacking, and he also was the one that got me interested in history. He dropped out of school after his 8th grade year. Of course, those were the days where you did that and you could go out and find a job. But he was an avid reader and just had impeccable penmanship, and he had an 8th grade education, and he's really one of the better, more well-read men that I've ever come into contact with, and he was the one that kind of pushed me towards history just because that's what he read. So. Yes?
What's your favorite hike in San Diego?
Well, probably my favorite hike in San Diego is going up Mount Cuyamaca. It's kind of a neat view. It's also where I proposed to my wife, and the interesting thing about it, I proposed to her in the winter, and they had a snow crew. At that time, they had somebody permanently stationed up there, and so they had a snow crew that was taking the snow off of the road so that they could get up there, people that lived up there, and the snow crew consisted of prisoners, and so we walked past the prisoners and walked to the top of the peak, and it was cold, so she had to get close to me. And so I popped the question to her, and I figured, I didn't preface it, but I thought if she said no, then I would say, well, I'm leaving you up here and the prisoners can have their way with you. But fortunately she said yes, but that's my favorite hike, I think, just because of that. Yes?
Speaking of your wife, we understand that she's a teacher.
She's a teacher.
What's it like living in a family of teachers?
We have to, well, first of all, I think we both know what we go through, and what the highs and lows of teaching are. She teaches middle school, which should be paid 18 times more than high school. She teaches English, which I'm really not that good at. If you've ever read my tests, you can notice that there's mistakes that I make sometimes. Actually, I kind of kid her that actually I met her in high school, and we dated a few times, and she thought I was a pig. And but then we started dating when I was a freshman in college, and she was a high school senior, and we never stopped. So anyway, I always kid everybody that she had to help me write my college papers and edit them because there was no spell check. So I kind of kid her that had there been a computer around with spell check, I probably wouldn't have married her. But that's not true. That's just kind of a joke. She cooks really well, so anyway.
Is your son a teacher also?
And my son's a teacher. My daughter, who's the oldest child, who's now 31, she wanted to do anything but teach, probably being raised in a family with 2 teachers, and so she didn't choose teaching, but my son did. And he actually is a history teacher and a PE teacher at a middle school in San Diego. Yes.
So then how did you end up at La Jolla High teaching?
Well, I started teaching at a junior high school called O'Farrell Junior High School, which is a feeder school to Morse. I taught there in PE, and mostly history, but I had a couple PE classes also. And I taught there for 2 years. And I really wanted to get into coaching football. I had been coaching football the last 2 years of my college, and the year I did my student teaching, I was coaching football and in high school. And I continued that when I was at O'Farrell, even though it was a little tough sometimes getting to practice, because sometimes I had teacher meetings and all I had to stick around for. But so I really wanted to get into high school, and I had done it for a while, and I happened to know that there was a job that was open at Hoover. One of the coaches retired, and very conveniently, I happened to have a friend who had a friend, and so the guy called me up and said, "I'm looking for a football coach, and I know you're teaching in the district." And I said, "I'm looking forward to being a football coach." So somehow they arranged it for a history position at Hoover High School. I transferred there, taught at Hoover for 3 years. Was assistant football coach. Actually, I was the head JV coach for 3 years and assisted the varsity, and also was the varsity wrestling coach for 3 years and taught 4 classes of history. And then I was there for 3 years, and the position opened up at La Jolla High. The guy that I'd gone to work for at Hoover, we weren't really good. We won 2 games in 3 years, and the worst part about it is we knew we would only win 2 games. In fact, actually, we thought we'd been 1. So when you look at film of the other team, and we'd shut the film down and go, "Oh gosh, what are we going to do?" And the neat part about it is kind of a sidelight. It's about Hoover, but the team that I was coaching on there, at that time we played 9 football games, and we were 0-9, and we should have been 0-10 because we just really had no chance to win any of the games. And one of my best memories in football is in coaching football is that year at Hoover, because sometimes when teams aren't doing well, you have guys figure reasons to not play and quit, and we didn't have one guy quit on that team. And it was so special when we came out to practices on Monday. We'd be going, okay, what are we going to do to get the guys excited here? We're playing against Lincoln, and they've got 5 guys that are going to go to college and play Division I football, and we got 0 guys that are going to be able to play beyond high school. And we try to figure out all these things to make it exciting. We never had to, because the kids were just really focused. They loved playing the game. They didn't really care about the win-loss. They just had fun playing the game, which to me is the pure essence of athletics. I always told my teams when I was the head coach here, would you play this game if you knew you'd never win a game? And, because that team really kind of inspired me. But anyway, the head coach left to go take a job at Kearney, and a job opened at La Jolla, and I applied for it, teaching history and doing some coaching. That was the year that University City opened, and so 2 of the coaches who were on site here, Coach Lamont and Coach Vukovic, were both football coaches, and they transferred. Coach Lamont became the first head baseball coach at UC, and Coach Vukovic was the first head football coach. So there was 2 positions that opened here at La Jolla, and I think I interviewed for it at that time. I think I was one of about, or 2, there was 2 positions, but I was one of about 34 people that were interested in the job, that were working in the school district as a teacher. And they brought in Coach Huddleston and myself. Fortunately, I had got to know Coach Edwards, who was the old coach and who was at La Jolla High School for a long time, and he was part of the hiring process since he was the head coach. So he knew who I was, just because we had competed against each other in both football and in wrestling. And I don't know if that helped, but I ended up getting the job, and Coach Huddleston from Point Loma High came over, and we were the 2 guys that filled that spot. So that was I think that was the fall of 1981. So, yes.
So in the time that you've been coaching and teaching in high school, how much has everything kind of changed, like the students and just kind of the atmosphere? Can you tell us about that?
You know what, kids are kids. I don't think it's changed tremendously. I think the kids still like to play. I would say maybe there's a couple of things that have changed in high school athletics. One is more and more you have to worry about money. And San Diego District making all the cutbacks that they have to make because of the state budget. So you have to kind of juggle the finances and try to figure out how you're going to raise money to hire coaches. You know, when I was a head coach here, we were hiring coaches to come in and come in every day, basically come in 6 days a week, and many of them coming in after work. And they got a stipend of $700 to do that, and that went from August until November. So that was a 6-day-a-week job, and they got $700 to do that. And so really, that's a kind of a love of it. And actually, that's still the way it is. You know, when you look at the La Jolla staff in the last few years, there's not a lot of football coaches walking around on campus. I think Coach Rosenberg last year was the only one. That means there's a lot of guys that have to come on and again to attempt to juggle their schedule because they really have a love for the game and a love for coaching. And last year I think we had some coaches here that were getting $500 to work for 4 months, 6 days a week after work. So anyway, that's one of the challenges that has been pretty big. And another challenge, and I'm not trying to create some waves here, but another challenge is when I first started teaching and coaching, especially coaching, parents were happy their kids were playing, and not too many of them were too involved in their kids. We never had parents come and watch practice on a daily basis, and that's happened in the past 10, 15 years. Emails are wonderful, but you start getting emails from parents telling you that you're running the wrong offense and you need to run this play. And I always emailed them back and said, well, send me your resume and we'll talk. And normally that didn't really go very far, but I think the parental involvement has gotten a lot more severe. And I'm saying severe from the standpoint that we've had some changes in our football staff in the last few years. People that have been very, very dedicated to La Jolla High School who are not coaching anymore. So, and I'm not knocking all parents, but there's some that are a little bit aggressive, and unfortunately, that's kind of one of the things that's happening in athletics. So I don't think that's a good trend. Really, I think when you're in high school, your parents got to let you start making some decisions and some mistakes and be held accountable for some of your mistakes. So anyway, but I will say this too. My son came to La Jolla High School, so my daughter did not. She did not want to be anywhere near where her dad was, which was very understandable because I'm very protective of my daughter. My son I don't care about, but you know how dads are with their daughters. But my son came to La Jolla High, and I wish it was for academics, but it was really because he had for a long time been our water boy, and he wanted to play night football. And we live in University City, and University City at that time didn't have lights. So he wanted to play night football, and he liked our baseball field better than UC's baseball field. So that was the criteria for him wanting to come. So he came to La Jolla High School, and I never taught him. The only thing I did was coach him football. And I think if you would ask people, I was very honest with him, and I was very honest with the program. He was a pretty decent quarter. He didn't play football until his 9th grade year, and we didn't have a freshman team. And he backed up the JV as a quarterback. His sophomore year in JV threw 14 touchdown passes in 10 games, and so that's pretty good for a JV. And he never quarterbacked on the varsity level. And that was a decision I made to go with somebody who was about 3 inches taller and had a stronger arm, who coincidentally holds all the passing records for La Jolla High School. So I probably made the correct decision, but there were some people who thought it was a little weird that I kind of pushed my own son aside. But he was our second-string quarterback for 2 years, but he was smart because he realized that this kid could throw the ball harder and could throw it faster and was a lot bigger and faster and quicker. And so he actually instigated the move of him moving to a new position when he said, this guy can throw, I want to be a receiver. And so he was able to go out and catch a lot of footballs from this guy. So it turned out really nice for both, but it was a decision that I had to make, and fortunately he was also recognizing that this guy probably had more ability than he did. So coaching him wasn't a problem. But anyway.
What year was that then?
He graduated from here in 2001, so he was here 1999, 98, 99, 2000, and 2001. So, yeah.
Coming off the fact that you said you were a coach and a teacher, and you have a son, what have you learned as a dad from being a coach and a teacher?
I don't know. I had some, like I say, I kind of go back to my grandfather. On a lot I learned about how to be a dad because that's the role model in my life that did that. I don't really have any memories of my dad other than the day he died. But my grandfather was a very, very strong man. He was a very fair man. He was a man of a few words, which I don't think I emulate that part. But his words were chosen well. He was a man that from the very beginning pushed me to push myself without me knowing it, and setting a pace for me on his life and what he did, the way he acted. To me, it was that's where I learned a lot of it. Where I just learned a lot, and as far as how to deal with my own children, and I've always liked high school because in high school you can teach a little bit more responsibility, and again, I kind of like that. I had one rule for my kids growing up, and it was the same rule my grandfather had, and that was don't lie to me. If you lie to me, you've lost my trust, and if you lose my trust, you lose me. And I remember that, and I told my kids that, and I'm sure they probably lied to me once in a while, but that was something that I really valued. And tried to push that in my children. And we are, again, our children were fortunately pretty well behaved and seemed to plug into school. They were very different. My daughter was much more academic than my son. I was a kid when they were little. We used to have to go to her and say, okay, you've read this book for 23 hours. Go outside and kick a ball against the garage door for an hour before you come back and read again. And with my son, it was, okay, you've kicked the ball against the garage door for 23 hours, now come in and read a book for an hour. And so it was always kind of a push and show. They were very different, but anyway, they turned out okay, I guess. So, I'm very proud of my daughter. She didn't pick education, but she's an attorney, lives up in San Francisco, and is practicing law. So.
If you're a senior in high school right now, what would you be like and what would you be involved in the school?
Well, I probably would be involved in sports because that was kind of one of the things I really like to do. But I would probably be involved in a lot of clubs too because I really like playing sports, but sometimes I don't like to be around athletes all the time. A lot of people, when I was coaching football, people would always go, well, how do you think the Chargers are going to do? And I go, I don't know. I didn't watch the Chargers. I watched La Jolla football. Didn't have time to watch anything on TV, and when I did have time, I really preferred to spend it with my wife. And she had to sit in the stands and watch a lot of high school football games in all the years that we were married and went out together. And so I just preferred rather than, so I wasn't so immersed in it that it was my life. I just started watching professional football in the years that I quit coaching. And to be honest with you, I'd prefer to watch high school football. So to me, it's a little bit more pure. The competition's a little bit more pure. If I want to watch people make fools of themselves and asses out of themselves, I'll just look in the mirror. I don't need to go further. So, anyway, yeah.
Why'd you quit coaching?
I quit coaching for a couple of reasons. One of them was my wife is a teacher, and when I was the head football coach at La Jolla High School for 11 years, we went on a vacation over a week a year one time. So the most vacation we got, vacation time. In the summer is very intense for a football coach with keeping the weight room open and passing league and all that. So we took one vacation over a week in 11 years. And that was when my daughter was in law school. It was right towards the end of my coaching, and my daughter was in law school, and she did a semester in England. And when she finished that, we went over and spent 10 days in London with her, and then we came home. So she kind of showed us around all the ins and outs to London. So, but yeah. Yes.
What's the most frustrating thing that you see a student do?
Well, one of the most frustrating things to me is just lack of respect sometimes. My grandfather and my mom, I'm not leaving my mom out of this. She was a heck of a strong woman. She raised my older brother and myself by herself. She met my father in World War II. She's from France. She was a young girl. They met each other, and he went off and continued to. When he was in that section of France, she spoke English, had taught it in school, had been learned it in school when she was a teenager, and so she worked for the United States Army in communications. And then when the Army pulled out and went to Germany, my dad went with him, and he got the thrill of. It was a really cool senior trip. He graduated in '43, and had a full expense-paid vacation to Europe to kill Nazis, and he did it. And it was, again, I never really got to talk to him about it, but he met my mom, and then when the war was over with and he was about to be transferred to the Pacific to fight against Japan, he had the opportunity to have some time off. He went back to Reims, where my mom's from, and they continued to fall in love. And then he fortunately didn't have to go to fight the Japanese because the war ended, and he came back to the United States. He went to college on the GI Bill. He was the first Ponsford to go to college. That was not available to anybody. World War II gave him that benefit. He wrote my mom for 3 years, and they carried on a relationship by mail. And I was amazing about that because it wasn't instantaneous. It was send a letter and get the letter in 3 weeks and read it and then respond. So it was, but they carried on a relationship by mail for 3 years, and then he went back going into his senior year in college and married her and brought her to the United States. She was 22 years old and spoke English. And anyway, so my mom played a big role in me also. But anyway, what was the question again? I got off carried away here. What was that?
What frustrates you?
Oh.
Most frustrating thing to do.
Well, you know what? It's just probably disrespect. My mom and my dad, or my grandfather, really taught me to respect people, no matter who they are. And when I see people disrespect the people, it really kind of bothers me a little bit. I try not to. I'm sure at times you're probably all going, "Oh yeah, you disrespect us all the time," but I try not to. To me, I think when you treat somebody like they're less than you, that's not good. Yes.
Do you have a favorite quote or something you live by or believe in? I heard you had the 10 tips for life. What is that?
Yeah, but I'm not sure I can repeat some of those. But
Yeah, you can.
oh, I can't remember them. I got to read them. But I would venture, to me, is that, you have to find somebody to love and share your time with. And that, to me, is the greatest thing I ever did was meet my wife and fall in love with her. And it wasn't a lot of work to do that. It just seemed to come natural. But she really is the best thing for me ever, and still is. So I don't know if that's a quote or anything, but find somebody to share it with, somebody to love. Yeah.
Have you ever just been inspired by a student, or just had a student change your life?
You know what? When I was at Hoover, there was a young lady named Carol Simonides, and she was a regular kid when I first got there, and by the time she was a senior, she had some serious health issues that were not. It was just a bad luck that left her in a wheelchair, and to watch her courage of persevering through that, was to me very, very inspiring. This is kind of I just kind of think there was a kid at La Jolla High School named Andy Weissman, and this was one of my first years of coaching on the varsity, so I think it was somewhere in the late 80s, early 90s. Andy Weissman was one of my offensive linemen. He was the smallest guy on the team, and he got to play very, very little. He never got to start. Fortunately, we had a pretty good team, and he ended up playing some right at the end of games, but he played very, very little. And but he was a kid that was just always giving 100% and really working hard. And one of the things that I always remember was after our last football game, And I think it was somewhere in like the first round of the playoffs, and we got beat. And so we all go in the office, the kids change and everything, and so we coaches sit around and talk. And I was an assistant, and so I said, well, I'll see you guys in the morning. We'll look at film, and not the players, but the coaches do to kind of wrap the season up. And I walked out on the field, and the lights were still on because the custodians were cleaning the field. And I looked down at midfield on the 50-yard line. At that time we didn't have the turf field, so it was a big patch of dirt. And there's a football player sitting on the 50-yard line, and I walked down there, and it was Andy, and he was crying. And he said, I'm never going to be able to play this again. I love it, and I can never play it again. And he was crying. And I thought, man, that's cool. That's really cool. So that was kind of inspiring. I've had others. I find great inspiration of especially kids and people doing well. So, Yeah.
Sorry, where did you go? Oh yeah. Were you teaching during the Challenger space when the Challenger spaceship blew up? And if you were, what was that day like for you?
Well, we kind of had a tie at La Jolla High School on that because remember that was when the Challenger was when the teacher in space went, and we had a staff member who had gone through the process. Gloria McMillan had gone through the process, and I think was runner-up, and she could have very easily have been on that space flight. So we as a staff were kind of paying close attention to her process of going through the steps to get to that point. So I think everybody was kind of paying attention. There was a lot of publicity for the first teacher in space, Christina McAuliffe. It was McAuliffe, right? I think that's what it was. So a lot of people were paying attention. It's the first time that we're going to see a civilian go up, and unfortunately it ended up tragically. And so, I remember it very vividly.
Were there classrooms watching it?
You know what? I think we were. I think we were watching it because that vision of that happening was one of those things. Sometimes when you see something happen that is just completely unexpected, and that was one of those things. You're watching on TV, and all of a sudden you're going like, whoa, wait a minute, whoa, that shouldn't be happening. I had another experience like that when I was teaching at Hoover. That was when there was an airline crash in San Diego, and my classroom happened to face west from Hoover, and it was right at the end of one of my periods, and I was just finished, and I was up in front of the class, and I heard a kid say a swear word. And back then, kids didn't say swear words in school. But this kid said a swear word, and it was a girl, which back then girls didn't say swear words in school. And I look up at her, and then she's not looking at anything in the classroom. You can tell she's looking out, and I look out, and I see this airliner smoking suspended in air, which seemed like for 20 minutes, but I'm sure it was just a moment, kind of put into my memory, and then it just peeled down and went straight in and blew up. So that was one of those memories that you kind of embedded in your mind. Certainly the space shuttle was, and then that was another one that's happened. Yes.
Did you get a chance to talk to that teacher and get her reaction to it?
She was happy she wasn't on. Yeah, we all did. Yeah. Happy she wasn't. Now, you know what though? She got to know the late Christina McCall very well because they were doing some of the same training, and so she was very upset about it because she kind of lost a friend. But that was kind of weird. Yes.
Well, as long as we're on such a dark subject, we understand that you've had some of the students that were involved with the Bird Rock Bandits a while ago. What was that like? What were they like?
That was a little bit weird. You know what? To me, one of the values that sports, I think, gives participation is belonging and build your confidence and build your self-esteem. I wish I could say that every kid that I touch is going to, that it has gone in the right direction. I will tell you this: the Bird Rock Bandits, and there was one exception to that, and I gotta mention that Hank Hendricks was the exception to that. Hank Hendricks was a kid that really lost a lot out of this. He lost a lot by being at the scene of the crime, and when the blow was struck, which he had nothing to do with, he left. And as a result of that, he got implicated in this thing. He had just arrived in town the same night. He was a quarterback he was a quarterback for me, and he was a quarterback at the University of New Hampshire, which at that time was one of the best 1AA teams in the country. He was here to visit his mom and his family, and he was out with the guys. He was old enough to be out with the guys having a beer. They were 21. The fight happened. He tagged along, and he got implicated in the whole thing, and it ruined his college career. He was supposed to be the starting quarterback at the University of New Hampshire for his junior and his senior year. New Hampshire, because of this, pulled his scholarship, and he had to fight to get rid of all that, all that it entailed, and he ended up getting his degree. So he was kind of one of the ones, but the other ones were they were a lot of trouble coming into La Jolla High School. They had a really bad reputation at Muirlands for fighting and for partying. I didn't really have any problems with them in football. Part of it was I had very few rules, and one of the rules was don't break the law, and don't embarrass your teammates, your school, your parents, or your coaches, and don't especially embarrass your head coach. That was my rules. And I determined what embarrassment was, and I didn't tell them what embarrassment was. I really didn't have any problems with them in football. I think it was because they really liked the game and they liked to play, and maybe they could take their aggressions out legally. But I really didn't have any problems with them. When this all happened, I was really kind of depressed. Obviously, when you coach somebody, you become part of you, and you become part of them, and I hope. And when this happened, I remember I was sitting, Coach Rosenberg and myself were sitting in the teacher lounge in the morning, and he said, "Did you hear the news about somebody dying down the street here on Draper?" And I go, "Yeah." And we named 2 of the kids that were involved. And it was just based upon once they left high school, their lifestyle went back into that fighting thing. Again, and I'm not going to say they weren't doing it in high school. They weren't doing it much at La Jolla High School because I used to give the roster out to teachers and say, if you have one kid that crosses their eyes at you in an angry way, let me know. If they do something wrong, let me know. It won't happen. They won't be a part of our team. And I think those guys really loved playing the sport so much that they kind of, now what they did off campus, if it didn't come to me, I don't party with La Jolla kids. So what they did off campus, if it comes to me by the administration of the school or a reliable source, I'm bouncing around here, but before the first game, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I really believe sports is something that should create integrity, and it should create wholesomeness. And before my first head football coaching gig here, my first game, when I took over the program in 98, I suspended 5 football players from the first game, and because I had heard from a report that they were at a party drinking, and drinking's against the law, and they broke my rules. And we got beat that game too. And I'm not going to say it was because those guys didn't play, but 4 of them were starters. And so to me, that's always been kind of something that's more important than the actual score. And anyway, getting back to the Bird Rock Bandits, didn't have many problems with them, but unfortunately, when they got out of high school, they were rather directionless, and they hung around, and pretty much all they did was enjoy the life of partying, fighting, and whatever. So, yeah.
Have you ever been intimidated by a high school student in your teaching career?
No. No. I used to be able to run pretty fast.
How about breaking up a fight?
You know what? At La Jolla High School, not a lot of fights. Hoover High School, there was one fight that I broke up that was a pretty nasty one. But fortunately, it kind of worked its way out. it had the potential of being racial, and in La Jolla or at Hoover at that time was fairly racial, and we had a lot more black kids, and it was a fight between a black kid and a white kid, and the white kid wasn't a kid. He was actually somebody on campus dealing drugs, we found out, because I'd never seen him. And there was a teacher who taught across from me who just retired a few years ago at Hoover. His name was Frank McBride, and we coached football at Hoover together, and we taught social studies together. He was right across the hall, and we heard kind of this big rumble and going outside of yelling and stuff, and a lot of kids. And so we both came out of our room at the same time, and we kind of walked to the steps of the building and looked down, and there was a fight going on, and it was between a white guy and a black guy, and it had the potential to be something that could maybe go beyond that. And so I remember Frank going, I'll take the black guy, you take the white guy. I said, okay. So I took the white guy, and I used to be a little bit stronger, and I was a wrestling coach and had wrestled some in high school, so I wasn't too intimidated by the guy. I just didn't know who he was, and I'm kind of grabbing him by the arms and pushing him away, and he's bleeding all over me. And this was before you had gloves to put on or everything. So he's just guy got worked. It turned out to be the greatest thing in the world. He was on campus selling drugs and approached this guy about buying drugs, and the guy told him to shove it or something like that, and the guy got mad at him, and they got in a fight. But anyway, but I wasn't too intimidated. The only thing that was just because it had the potential of involving other people, because the passions were pretty heavy, especially when the guy that I was pushing back yelled the N-word at the guy that Frank was holding back. And I remember around the crowd a lot of noise, and I heard this Frank's voice was never at a real high pitch, but it was a very high pitch, and he goes, "Look out, Pons." And so I kind of glance, and I see something running towards me, which is a black kid that got yelled at, and so I shoved the kid at him. He ended up he ended up hitting him in the face and breaking his nose, so that was cool. But, so I didn't have to feel intimidated. The kid did take care of it. Yeah.
Speaking of the subject of retirement, do you have any retirement plans or any dreams that you want to do when you retire?
Well, yeah, my wife and I want to travel more. In the years I coached, summers were we got traveling in, but we want to travel together while we're healthy. We like to take long walks together, and sometimes we don't get to do that. So we'd like to do that while we're still healthy. I'd like to spend a little bit more time just reading for pleasure instead of reading essays. Yeah.
Is there one place you really want to travel to, and why?
I'd like to go back to France, and don't really have any relatives. My mom was a single child, so I don't really have any direct relatives on my mom's side, but I'd like to go back. I got the opportunity to see my grandparents for the first time when I would graduate from 9th grade. When my dad died, my mom had to get an education in the United States, and fortunately there was something called Social Security, and we lived on Social Security, the three of us. We were lucky. My dad was a chemist, which I don't speak French, and I'm terrible at chemistry, so I'm not sure if I was adopted or something, but my dad majored in chemistry and was working for General Dynamics here in San Diego. They had an Atlas rocket that they were trying to perfect, and they were working on different fuels, whether solid or liquid fuels. And anyway, I guess I don't remember that. But when he got sick, fortunately, the General Dynamics paid for our house. So my mom didn't have to worry about paying a house payment. So we lived on Social Security while she went back to San Diego State, and she went to San Diego State and got a degree in nursing and became a nurse practitioner. But anyway, it was kind of tight for a while, and we actually, after my 9th grade year, we got to actually visit France and meet my grandparents for the first time. My brother had just graduated from high school, and it's kind of a funny. I tell some people this sometimes. We went the cheapest way possible, which was not airlines in 1966. It was boat, and we took an English ship out of Los Angeles, and we stayed on G deck, There was AAA deck, AA deck, single A deck, and all the way down to G. And G was you are basically sleeping this close to the engine. And my brother and I were in a male room. There was 80 bunks stacked, something like 4 high or 5 high, and we had 1 toilet. So it was pretty Spartan, and 1 toilet, 1 shower. My mom stayed in the female section of G deck, which was in 80 bunks, but they had 2 toilets for 80 women, and the food wasn't really good. There was actually 3 levels of travel on the ship, and we were the level 3. And on G deck, that was kind of, the food was pretty raunchy. But we had a great time. It was a great experience. We spent a little time in Acapulco, and we went through the Panama Canal, which was a memory it's one of my strongest memories. And we went to the island of Curacao, the island of Trinidad, and then to Lisbon, Portugal, and then to Le Havre, France. Spent the summer with my grandparents, got to meet them and got to experience that whole thing. So that was, I'd like to go back there and just kind of, visit my grandfather's graveside, and because he actually came out my senior year in high school. He came out to, he and my grandmother came out to San Diego and visited, and he actually got to watch me play a high school football game, and he thought it was the stupidest sport he ever saw in his life. He was a rugby guy. He was a prisoner of war during World War II for 5 years in Nazi Germany. He had just made the French national rugby team. He was a pretty good athlete, and never got to play a game because they drafted all the men because World War II started, and he was on the Maginot Line facing Germany. And his big regret, according to my mom, in life was that he never got to shoot a gun at a Nazi, because the Nazis didn't go into the Maginot Line. They went around it through Belgium and came in behind, and the Maginot Line couldn't turn around because it was fixed gun emplacements facing Germany. And so anyway, they surrendered really without a shot, and that was his big regret in life, was not being able to shoot a Nazi. But I guess if you sat 5 years in this prisoner of war camp and came back at about 105 pounds, you probably would have those tensions. But anyway, yeah.
Now, if you don't mind us asking, how much do you bench press?
Now?
Now.
Now, probably not very much.
How about your prime? Yeah.
In my prime, which wasn't high school, and it wasn't college either. And in college, I didn't play football. I was a good high school football player, but I wasn't good enough to get a scholarship. I had actually, the closest I came to playing college football was UCSD. They were recruiting me, and then right about the time, and I got in academically, and right about the time they dropped their program. And so that didn't work out. And it was a Division III school, and there was other Division III schools, but to be honest with you, in our family circumstance, I couldn't afford it. I went to San Diego State, and my freshman year through my senior year, I loved football, and I wanted to coach it dearly. But I worked 30 hours a week all through college for a bank as a courier. So it was a good paying job. I went to work at 1 a.m. and I worked until 6 a.m. and they paid me pretty good, better by time and a half, or 50% more than minimum wage was at that time. So it was a good job, but I had to work to do that and help pay through my college. So unfortunately, I wasn't quite good enough to get the. So it really actually wasn't even at that time, because when I was in college, I was working and going to school and studying, and didn't really have a lot of time to do very much. But once I got access to a weight room and they were actually paying me to be on site, I kind of picked up lifting again. And I think the best I ever had was like 330.
330?
Yeah. So, and actually, when you get old, you start hurting yourself,
Yeah.
And I haven't bench pressed probably in 2 years, but 2 years ago I was doing 270. But I haven't been in there for 2 years. I've been doing a lot of push-ups. Don't bother me, but bench press for some reason was kind of tweaking my shoulder a little bit, and so I kind of backed off on that and just kind of do push-ups now. Crawford. Yeah. And we were terrible. But anyway.
We hear you have some modeling experience. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. Well, it's actually, I kind of make a big deal out of it, but it really wasn't much. My wife's best friend, who, by the way, she went to see Les Miserables with last Saturday. They were raised next to each other in East San Diego, and they've remained best friends. They first met each other like at 3 years old, and they're still best friends, so it's really cool. But anyway, what was the question again?
Modeling.
Oh, modeling, yeah. See, I kind of take the modeling out of my life. She worked for a film production company in San Diego for a while, and they did commercials. And it was one day during the summer, and actually my wife and I were celebrating our anniversary, and we were actually, you know, that high rise down on La Jolla Shores? At that time we were living in La Mesa, and we, for our anniversary, spent a couple nights in that high rise, which was kind of cool. And I remember and so all of a sudden the phone rang, and Lynn, my wife, had told Lynn where we were going to do this, so she called the hotel, and she said, "Can I talk to Dave?" I go, "Yeah." This was like 6:30 in the morning. And I go, "Yeah." And she goes, "How are your hands?" "Well, I don't know. I guess they're okay." She goes, "You got any sores?" "No." She says, "You want to make some money?" I go, "Yeah." I said, "What's going on?" She said, "Well, we had a commercial shoot, and we hired a hand model. And when he was closing, just got to where the shoot was, which was down in Sorrento Valley. He slammed his hand in the car door. So his bad luck was my good luck. So I became a hand model, and I was on a commercial. My hands were on a commercial that it actually was not shown in San Diego, but they had me grabbing things. And so I was grabbing. It was a car auto parts. So they I grab a can of oil and kind of hold it up to the camera. But you had to grab it kind of manly like, because motor oil on sale, and it only took about 10 takes because I kept putting my finger over you can't put your finger over the product name. We've got to have the product, got to hold the product. And so anyway, I made a little bit of money doing that, and not a lot, like several $100s, but I guess if you get paid, you're a model, right? A pro model. And actually, I was in another one. Our family she got us in one when our kids were very little. We got into we were in a commercial that aired in the San Francisco area, and it was for a bank, and the bank was having a loan sale. And we were, you could get a loan for a house, and you could get a loan to take a vacation. And we were a 3-second clip in this commercial and we shot the commercial in Mission Bay, in a house in Mission Bay. And what we did is we just came out of a house and started walking towards a car that was not ours, but it had a luggage rack and a boat on the back. And I had my daughter's hand, and my wife was carrying my son. And that was a part anyway, that was part of the commercial for 3 seconds. It was we don't have a copy of that, but yeah. Yes.
What advice would you give to the class of 2013?
You know what? I honestly think. First of all, find love. That's just find that person. I honestly believe you have to have a belief bigger than yourself. And I think to really find satisfaction. My grandmother was a very religious woman. My mom's very religious. They didn't really push the religion onto me, but they found great contentment in life, and I think that was part of it. So I think that would be maybe something. And you know what? Find a job you like. I got a good friend of mine who was an electrician and didn't really like it, but it paid pretty well, and he never really enjoyed life. And when you think about the fact that you're working 8 hours a day, I honestly have never gotten up in the morning and go, I don't want to go to work today. I've never experienced that. In fact, as I'm getting older, I keep getting up earlier and coming to work. So, you know, if you're ever here at 4 a.m., you'll see me.
One last question.
Yeah. Yes.
What is the most interesting experience you've ever had in your teaching career?
In my teaching career?
Or, yeah.
I was going to say the most interesting experience I've ever had was flying with the Blue Angels. And that actually came out of my teaching career because it was an ex-student who was in the Navy and a pilot and somehow arranged for me to be on the list to do that. So that was probably the most interesting thing in my teaching career. I really have a hard time picking one thing, but it's just, I think at the end of the year, well, maybe I do. Probably the most interesting thing is when you see, you know, I work with 11th graders now for most of my career, and when you see the kids go off, when they come back and say hi, that really means a lot, I think, to every teacher that you know, so, yeah, I would say that to me is the most interesting thing, is to see how they're doing, to see what they're doing. And actually, one of the nice things that the alumni, with me retiring, the Alumni Association sent out an email to the football players that have played during my tenure at La Jolla High School, and I've been getting emails and just, you know, from guys, and just now they're, you know, they've got families, and, you know, just saying hi and congratulations, and, you know, I'm doing well, and the lessons I learned, you know, helped me, thank you. That's probably the very best part. I mean, I'm kind of experiencing that high right now. Just periodically they'll pop an email up and I'll look at it, and it's kind of neat. So.
Yeah. Have you ever taught like any of your like students' children? Like they had maybe back when you first started, and their child came through.
Yes.
And were they like their parents? What was that like?
You know what? I don't think they were much different. I don't remember any vivid memory of them being different. I think the truth of the matter is, you know, you're going to be a lot more like your parents than you think you are. Right? And I just, you may not, right now you're in high school and you're saying, oh, I want to be away, but my daughter's now 31 and she's more like my wife now than she's ever been in her life. And, you know, she was not a rebellious kid or, you know, any of that, but, you know, you're going to be more like your folks than you think you are. And when you have your own kids and you start saying the same things to your kids that your mom and dad said to you, or your mom said to you, or my grandfather said to me, I use those same lines on my kids. But yeah. So.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Well, this is kind of cool. This beats teaching, you know.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.